swinging its tip out of the lake. She sniffed. There was a languid perfume in the air, the perfume of the blooming turbie. She examined the flowers closely. To all appearances, they were perfect and natural. "It preserves." Lur settled back on his haunches and waved one front paw at the quiet water. "What goes into it remains as it was just at the moment of entrance." "But if this is 7 months old—" "It may be 7 years old," corrected Lur. "How can you tell when the branch first dipped into the lake? Yet the flowers do not fade, even when withdrawn from the water. This is indeed a mystery." "Of which I would know more." Varta dropped the turbie and started on around the edge of the lake. Twice more they found similar evidence of preservation in flower or leaf, wherever it was covered by the opaline water. The lake itself was a long and narrow slash, with one end cutting into the desert of glass, while the other wet the foot of the mountain. And it was there, on the slope of the mountain, where they found the greatest wonder of all, Lur scenting it before they sighted the remains among the stones. "Man-made," he cautioned, "but very, very old." And truly the wreckage they came upon must have been old, perhaps even older than Memphir. For the part which rested above the water was almost gone, rusty red stains on the rocks outlining where it had lain. But underwater was a smooth silver hull, shining and untouched by the ears. Varta laid her hand upon a ruddy scrap between two rocks, and it became a drift of powdery dust. And yet, there, a few feet below, was strong metal. Lur padded along the scrap of shore, surveying the thing. "It was a machine in which men traveled," his thoughts arose to her. "But they were not as the men of Memphir, perhaps not even as the sons of Erb." "Not as the sons of Erb?" Her astonishment broke into open speech. Lur's neck twisted as he looked up at her. "Did the men of Erb, even in the old chronicles, fight with weapons such as would make a desert of glass? There are other worlds than Erb. Mayhap this strange thing was a sky-ship from such a world. All things are possible by the will of Asti." Varta nodded. "All things are possible by the will of Asti," she repeated. "But Lur—" her eyes were round with wonder. "Perhaps it is Asti's will which brought us here to find this marvel. Perhaps he has some use for us and it." "At least we may discover what lies within it." Lur had his own share of curiosity. "How? The two of us cannot draw that out of the water." "No, but we can enter into it." Varta fingered the folds of the hood on her shoulders. She knew what Lur meant. The suit which had protected her in the underworld was impervious to everything outside its surface, or to every substance its makers knew, just as Lur's own hide made his flesh impenetrable. But the fashioners of her suit had probably never known of the living lake, and what if she had no defense against the strange properties of the water? She leaned back against a rock. Overhead the worlds and sun of Asti still traveled their appointed paths. The worlds of Asti. If it was his will which had brought them here, then Asti's power would wrap her round with safety. By his will she had come out of Memphir over ways no human of Erb had ever trod before. Could she doubt that his protection was with her now? It took only a moment to make secure the webbed shoes, to pull on and fasten the hood, to tighten the buckles of her gloves. Then she crept forward, shuddering as the water rose about her ankles. But Lur pushed on before her, his head disappearing fearlessly under the surface as he crawled through the jagged opening in the ship below. Smashed engines, which had no meaning in her eyes, occupied most of the broken section of the wreck. None of the metal showed any deterioration beyond that which had occurred at the time of the crash. Under her exploring hands it was firm and whole. Lur was pulling at a small door, half hidden by a mass of twisted wires and plates, and, just as Varta crawled around this obstacle to join him, the barrier gave way, allowing them to squeeze through into what had once been the living quarters of the ship. Varta recognized seats, a table, and other bits of strictly utilitarian furniture. But of those who had once been at home here there remained no trace. Lur, having given one glance to the furnishings, was prowling about the far end of the cabin uncertainly, and now he voiced his uneasiness. "There is something beyond, something which once had life." Varta crowded up to him. To her eyes the wall seemed without line of an opening, and yet Lur was running his broad front paws over it carefully, now and then throwing his weight against the smooth surface. "There is no door," she pointed out doubtfully. "No door. Ah, here." Lur unsheathed formidable fighting claws to their full length, for perhaps the first time in his temple-sheltered life, and endeavored to work them into a small crevice. The muscles of his forelegs and quarters stood out in sharp relief under his scales. His fangs were bare as his lips snapped back with effort. Something gave. A thin black line appeared to mark the edges of a door. Then time, or Lur's strength, broke the ancient locking mechanism. The door gave so suddenly that they were both sent hurtling backward, and Lur's breath burst from him in a huge bubble. The sealed compartment was hardly more than a cupboard, but it was full. Spread-eagled against the wall was a four-limbed creature whose form was so smothered in a bulky suit that Varta could only guess that it was akin in shape to her own. Hoops of metal locked it firmly to the wall, but the head had fallen forward so that the faceplate in the helmet was hidden. Slowly the girl breasted the water which filled the cabin and reached her hands toward the bowed helmet of the prisoner. Gingerly, her blunted talons scraping across metal, she pulled it up to her eye level. The eyes of that which stood within the suit were closed, as if in sleep, but there was a warm, healthy tint to the bronze skin, so different in shade to her own pallid coloring. For the rest, the prisoner had the two eyes, the centered nose, the properly shaped mouth which were common to the men of Erb. Hair grew on his head, black and thick, and there was a faint shadow of beard on his jawline. "This is a man," her thought reached Lur. "Why not? Did you expect a serpent? It is a pity he is dead." Varta felt a rich, warm tide rising in her throat to answer that teasing half-question. There were times when Lur's thought-reading was annoying. He had risen to his hind legs so that he too could look into the shell which held their find. "Yes, a pity," he repeated. "But—" A vision of the Turby flowers swept through her mind. Had Lur suggested it, or had that wild thought been hers alone? Only this ship was so old, so very old. Lur's red tongue flicked. "It can do no harm to try," he suggested slyly, and set his claws into the hoop holding the captive's right wrist, testing its strength. "But the metal on the shore, it crumpled into powder at my touch," she protested. "What if we carry him out only to have... Her mind shuddered away from the picture that followed. "Did the Turby blossom fade when pulled out?" countered Lur. "There is a secret to these fastenings." He pulled and pried impatiently. Varta tried to help, but even their united strength was useless against the force which held the loops in place. Breathless, the girl slumped back against the wall of the cabin, while Lur settled down on his haunches. One of the odd patches of color drifted by, its vivid scarlet like a jewel spiraling lazily upward. Varta's eyes followed its drift, and so were guided to what she had forgotten, the worlds of Asti. Asti! Lur was looking up too. The power of Asti! Varta's hand went up, rested for a long moment under the sun, and then drew it down, carefully,